This is Breaking Down the Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures.
Do you believe in the book? Do you believe in the scriptures? Well, good. Come walk with me after we go down to this particular question and answers. For a long time in my history, I've known that I had indigenous blood. But on a day like this, what the pagans and heathens are calling Thanksgiving, it's truly a day to reflect on what not to do with the pagans. This day is what they call Thanksgiving, is called the day of mourning or the day of murder, depending on what area that you're located in. This is not something that you want to participate in. It's really not something you want to participate in, because on one hand, you have people who are thinking they're giving Thanksgiving to and blessings to the Creator of us all, whom we call the Mosiah, and all praises to the Mosiah. And others are grieving because of genocide and murder. So after this video that I've done years ago, I'm just recounting what's going on here, because these fellow brothers and sisters are Israelites. And you guys should be aware of that. So is this truly a day of happy Thanksgiving? Or is this day really skewed and you're giving Thanksgiving and celebrating murder or genocide to an indigenous people, not only up there in Plymouth, but down the whole eastern seaboard? So this National Day of Mourning is people who are mourning the murder and slaughter of the indigenous people whom were known as Israelites. So in Devarim 28:30-31, it says, "You will be pledged to be married to a woman, but another will take her and rape her. You will build a house, but you will not live in it. You will plant a vineyard, but you will not even begin to enjoy its fruit." 31, "Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, but you will eat none of it. Your donkey will be forcibly taken from you and will not be returned. Your sheep will be given to your enemies, and no one will rescue them." In a sense, in the beginning, when the colonizers landed upon this place called Turtle Island, the indigenous people, or commonly called, some called African Americans, or from Africa, were already here, which is a misnomer for this African American. You can only be one or the other, but it's a misnomer. But after the so-called settlers came here, and the indigenous people taught them how to hunt, grow food, and survive, and with all these other diseases they brought with them, they basically plundered the whole place. They raped, they robbed, they murdered, they did all these different things. And it's up to you guys to pay attention to the text and how these things really are going on. As Israelites, we give Thanksgiving every single day. We don't wait till the secular or the pagans tell us when to give thanks to their sun gods and their sun worship. So what you're really celebrating, if it's not just a regular pagan holiday, you're celebrating the mass murdering of a people who did survive, by the way. So we're going to get into a little bit of history. I'm not going to be long here because I'm going to attach the other video behind this, the one that I did previous years, so you can have some more context and have some of the same slides. As a holiday, Thanksgiving began in 1637 when it was proclaimed by Governor John Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony to celebrate the safe return of the men who had gone to fight against the Pequot in Mystic, Connecticut. But listen, the fighting led to the enslavement and massacre of over 700 men and women and young ones from the new colony-based tribe, a bloody precursor to what would be centuries of strife of native peoples in the U.S. They're claiming native, but they're really indigenous. Okay? And these are just the numbers that they captured. And these people had skin that was very dark. Again, in 1637, near present day Groton, Connecticut, over 700 men and women and young ones of the Pequot tribe had gathered for their annual Green Corn Festival, which is what they're calling their Thanksgiving celebration. In the pre-dawn hours, the sleeping Indians were surrounded by the English and Dutch mercenaries, who ordered them to come outside. Those who came out were shot or clubbed to death, while the terrified women and little ones, young ones, who huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. Just imagine that. Gunfire all the way outside your house, and then all of a sudden there's extreme heat and fire everywhere. But these were small enclosures. And this is what they did. How does that sound like Thanksgiving when there wasn't even war? This was simply bias and treachery. Again, those who came out were shot or clubbed to death, while the terrified women and little ones who huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. The next day, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving because 700 unarmed men and women and young ones had been murdered. So those sons and daughters were murdered. Children is just a misnomer. It's a business. It's property of the United States. So that's why I say young ones are sons and daughters. And they cheered their victory. Brave colonists. You're so brave. Taking out unarmed sons and daughters, little ones, young ones. And their so-called Indian allies attacked the village after. Listen, they attacked the village. And then after they attacked, the women and young ones, over 14, were sold into slavery while the rest were murdered. Boats loaded with as many as 500 slaves regularly left the ports of New England. Bounties were paid for so-called Indian scalps to encourage as many deaths as possible. The book clearly says that the enemy has murder in their hearts. They cheered after they killed them. Unarmed men and women who helped you survive, and then you turn on them. Following an especially successful raid against the Pequot in what is now Stamford, Connecticut, the church has announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the heathen savages. Again, during the feasting, the hacked off heads of the natives were kicked through the streets like soccer balls. Even the friendly Wampanoag did not escape the madness. Their chief was beheaded and his head impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it remained on display for 24 years. What does that tell you? I mean, what does this really tell you? You're not supposed to know this type of history mainstream because they want to cover it up with ignorance. Blissful ignorance. So if you're listening to this, you've been celebrating genocidal murder. And you're wondering why some of the Indians or indigenous people have dark skin, very dark skin, and some are light. Look at the context I gave to you earlier. Now, the narrative surrounding the Thanksgiving story, as traditionally told in the United States, has been increasingly scrutinized for presenting simplified and often misleading representation of the historical events and relationships between the Pilgrims, so-called, and the Native American, so-called, particularly the Wampanoag. So the bottom line here, the Wampanoag people. So this is very true because if you look at it, they want to simplify the murderous acts of what they actually accomplished. The same people that brought you in, nursed you back to health, taught you to hunt and grow food, you destroy. And then you took the rest for yourselves. Here's the narrative. Oversimplification, the conventional story of the first Thanksgiving often portrays a harmonious and friendly relationship between the Pilgrims and Native Americans. This narrative glosses over the complex and often fraught interactions between European settlers and indigenous people. So true. Historical inaccuracies. The traditional Thanksgiving story tends to omit critical aspects of history, such as the impact of European diseases on native populations prior to violent encounters and the long-term consequences of the colonization, which they do not want you to know about. They want to gloss over it because they don't want you to know the true history of their ancestry, which is brutal murder, manipulation, punishment, interrogation. All of this is missing out of this. Misrepresentation of the Native people. The narrative often reduces Native Americans to mere supporting characters of the Pilgrims, survival story, ignoring their own rich cultures and history, and the fact that they had been living in the continent for thousands of years before European arrival. This is true. Just like the Taino Indians, such as, and some you have the Cherokee, then you have the commonly one they like to call Cherokee. So Taino has been in Turtle Island, what you call in America, for a while, and so have what you call so-called African Americans. They were already here. These Israelite brothers and sisters were already navigating the water before the Europeans were already on the scene. But you're not supposed to know about that. Check your history. They like to calm things down of their murderous history. Romanticization, the idyllic deception of the first Thanksgiving, romanticized the colonization process, masking the reality of conquest and cultural displacement experienced by the indigenous people, what they call native people. Why do they want it dumbed down? Because they want you in a blissful ignorance, thinking it's okay to celebrate murder, heathenistic, and pagan movements. So if you have the Ruach HaKodesh or soul, you're going to know something's wrong here. Drastically wrong. What's the reality? The complex relationships. The relationship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag was complex, involving alliances that were strategic and often fraught with tension and mistrust. Well, obviously, I'm being a little light here, but betrayal and murder, raping and robbing and stealing is what these people really did to the indigenous people. Impact of colonization. European colonization led to massive loss of life among indigenous people or Native Americans, so-called, due to disease, warfare, displacement. See, displacement means they're coming in and taking over your home and your living room. And you're either going to serve them or die. You're going to be forced to do something what they want to do because they have the overwhelming authority and power to move you out of your home, to move you off your land back then, and take your sister, your sons, your daughters, your women, and do whatever they want. because they're coming in as the authority, the strong figure, so to speak. That's what displacement is. It's a neutral word to gloss over things, but we explain it here. The effects of colonization profoundly altered the demographic and cultural landscapes of North America. Absolutely it did. I mean, what do you think was going to happen? The continued consequences, the legacies of these earlier encounters continue to affect Native American communities today, with ongoing issues related to land rights, sovereignty, and cultural preservations. I have no argument there because that's just simply true. Now, if we're reassessing and reevaluating what really happened in recent years, there's been a growing movement to reassess the frame, well, I would say frame, or reframing the Thanksgiving story to acknowledge its historical inaccuracies, its bloody murder roots that it's in, and then moving out or trying to kill the people that are still here. The story to acknowledge its historical inaccuracies and the impact of colonization on indigenous or native people. This involves education and creating a more accurate, and listen, pay attention to what I'm about to say. Education is a big part, and then if they control the news media, you're gonna have a hard time getting it out. But you can still get it out before this news media. You have to travel, but this is where it needs to get out, and it has been getting out. Again, encouraging a more accurate and comprehensive teaching of his story, or his story, the settler story, colonization story. Inclusion of the Native perspective, amplifying the voices and history of the Native American people in the narrative. That needs to be done. And it's growing more and more. Recognition of the National Day of Mourning, acknowledging this day, which coincides with so-called Thanksgiving to honor the memory of the ancestors and the ongoing struggles of Native people. Listen, the bottom line is the so-called African Americans and those Israelites are even, are part of that. And some of them don't even recognize the Israelites as indigenous people, but they are. So there's been a number done on us, so we got to pay attention. So here in Metitiayu 25:23, it says, his master said unto him, well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter down into the joy of my I will make thee a ruler over many things. Enter down to the joy of thy master. Listen. This is what we want the Most High Yah, or Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Christ, say to us, because we've done good work in his honor and not ours. In his ways, not ours, because his ways are above ours. Proverbs 4:23, keep guard thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Fellow Israelites, remain strong. Be a warrior of the word and a word warrior. Guard your ear and eye gates. And guard your mouth as well. For you need to know what you're saying before it comes out of it, because you will be held responsible, especially if you're in this walk of life. Don't let others distract you. Stay focused on the law. Do you know who you are? Do you know the difference between the two? What does this look like on the right and then on the left? What's the difference? Global Chat Daddy is their own social network. Global Search Daddy is their own search network. and Global Tube Daddy is own version of our audio and video. Okay? Don't forget to like us. And don't forget to subscribe if that's what you wish to do. But we will be moving all our stuff over to the other platforms. I bid you guys shalom and take heed. And again, I will attach the old video right behind this one. This is breaking down the Bible, the Hebrew Scriptures. Do you believe in the book? Do you believe in the Scriptures? Well, good, because in this portion it's all about Thanksgiving. So, before we get started, I want to put this up here into Galatians 4:16. I might therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth about Thanksgiving? Well, will I? What do you really know about Thanksgiving? Do you even know what happened? Or are you too busy getting your turkey and your candy yams and your cakes and your puddings and your pies together to go give thanks? But who or what are you giving thanks to? Do you even know the premise behind Thanksgiving and what it's for? Again, do I become your enemy because I bring forth the truth? So, happy Thanksgiving, not. Here, I found online this photo that I would bring forth to you in reference to Thanksgiving, how the native people of this land, who are Hebrews, some of them were Hebrews, were slaughtered on this very day that you call Thanksgiving. Now, here is Juan Gonzalez, who's doing his ritual to the premise of what happened to his ancestors on that day. So I found this, and I want to make sure that I used it and cited it correctly from the Boston Globe. But anyway, is this really Thanksgiving? Is this what they really did there? What do you think Thanksgiving is? Leave it in the comments and in the section below. And then tell me, what are your thoughts on Thanksgiving? Davarim 20:31-30. You will be pledged to be married to a woman, but another will take her and rape her. You will build a house, but you will not live in it. You will plant a vineyard, but you will not even begin to enjoy its fruit. Now, before I go to 31, does this not sound like what happened to the Indians when the Europeans, or what you might call pilgrims, came over here and took over and slaughtered their people, learned the agriculture, learned how to live like they did, took over their teepees or their booths, their homes, raped and pillaged the women? Is there any history background that you might have on Thanksgiving, how it actually came to evolve? And let's not start on anything with Christopher Columbus. He was a simple savage. He really didn't even come here, and it was a mistake if you look into the history. But he too had a lot of error. So if I tell you this, would you go back and research it? Would you look into the scriptures and then collude with them with the research and see how much of it is really true? But some of you won't, some of you will. So I pulled some things together here to give it to you. But again, I, Officer Wolfline, am not here to just feed you in a certain manner, but to teach you in a certain manner. Let's go to 31. Your ox will be slaughtered before your eyes, but you will eat none of it. Your donkey will be forcibly taken from you and will not be returned. Your sheep will be given to your enemies, and no one will rescue them. Remember the buffalo? Go back and research how many buffalo or ox were killed. Who was killing all of them? What were the Indians fighting for back then? Or why you might call them Indians, but they really were not Indians because they thought it was India in the research. So what was it? What group of people were there killing the buffalo with muskets? Do your research. Leave the comments below. Now, in this photo, you got a lot of turkeys looking at this person. But the only reason why he would hide something is because they might recognize it. And the same thing with this Babylonian area. If you put it before you and you were told what it was, or if you knew what it did, then you would scatter and move. But the deception of the European nature is quite obvious here. Very deceptive. Now, 1637 is when Thanksgiving began. It was proclaimed by that Governor Winthrop, in Massachusetts and Bay Colony, to celebrate the safe return of the men who had gone to fight against the Pequot in Mystic, Connecticut. The fighting led to the enslavement and massacre of over 700 men, women, and children from the New England-based tribe, a bloody precursor to what would be centuries of strife for Native people in the U.S. So, put this in perspective. You bring forth a meeting or a gathering to eat, and you do all these treaties and you do all these bargaining practices. One side is innocent enough, doesn't see it coming, but the other side is very deceptive, just like that axe you saw. So when you get done with your meeting, you're done eating, you're celebrating and give thanks, and then you slaughter the native Indians, the Aborigines of the land. You heard me right. So the Europeans killed those men and women and rejoiced in a word called Thanksgiving for conquering a less dominant people who were entrusting. You ever heard of the cowboy Indians? Why the Indians were fighting so much? Because the cowboys was taking over their land unjustly. They say one thing and do something totally different. So the words that are being spoken before you are not really what they seem. Just like in today's society. You have to learn the etymology behind the words. Another portion of this says something to the same effect in this particular slide. But what I wanted to point out to you is Groton, Connecticut, over 700 men and women and children of the Pequot tribe had gathered for their annual Green Corn Festival, which is their Thanksgiving celebration in the pre-dawn hours. The sleeping Indians were surrounded by English and Dutch mercenaries who ordered them to come outside. Those who came out were shot or clubbed to death, while the terrified women and children who huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. The next day, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving because 700, beautiful, right? 700 unarmed men and women and children had been murdered. I thought this would be picked a little bit better for you. What did the colonists do? They cheered in victory that their allies of the village were attacked after other villages. And women and children over 14, you know what they were done? 2, they were sold into slavery. And the rest they were killed off, they were murdered. And some of the boats were loaded. As much as 500 slaves regularly left the ports of New England. Bounties were paid for Indian scalps. That's when they started scalping, to encourage as many deaths as possible. So is that Happy Thanksgiving now? I pulled some of this information from one of the articles to give you a direct understanding of what this was. So at what point do you put down the turkey and the cranberry sauce and you say, wait a minute, I'm celebrating the massacre, the genocide of the original people of the land? This has nothing to do with your families or giving thanks for the day of gathering. Nothing. You got another one coming up, a celebration. You might call it Christmas. Some of you don't even look this stuff up. Christmas is Saturnalia. Look it up. Saturnalia. Matter of fact, if you go on my channel, I've done a whole process on that. So you can look at the Christmas and then you can go and look at how to be a good Christian. You know Officer Wolfline is a Hebrew, so you know I'm not a Christian. But if you're outside the guidelines of what I'm telling you there, you're a very good Christian. So I tell you how to be a good Christian. There's instructions on how to be a good Christian in that video. Also in that video is highly enlightening and makes you want to do the actual research. Some of you get upset because you don't know this information. But what do I tell you to do? Go look it up. Look up the day of mourning, the National Day of Mourning for Thanksgiving. Take some time to get off your iPads and your videos and your phones and do some research, whether you're using your hand or thumb, and even get it on the internet. A lot of information is on the internet, but you got to filter it and filter it and filter it. There's some truth in some of the stuff. You have to look for it, but there's a lot of garbage out there too. Okay? So you had no clue that I was going to do this video, but yet you knew it was coming. Yes. So, National Day of Mourning. Now, in this one, this was a follow-up to the successful raids against Pequot and what is now Stamford, Connecticut. The church has announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the heathen savages during the feasting. They hacked off heads of the natives, were kicked through the streets like soccer balls. Even the friendly Wampanoag, and if I'm pronouncing that wrong, forgive me, did not escape the madness. Their chief was beheaded and his head impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it remained on display for almost 24 years. At what point does this not disgust you? This is your Thanksgiving. This is what you're really celebrating. Let me back this up. At what point do you smell deception right now? Do you smell any? Guys, this information is everywhere. You got to wake up. You got to understand what's before you. So during that period of time when the Cowboys and Indians were going on, this is where their Thanksgiving. This is why the Indians were attacking. Land stolen. Their meat supply was deplenishing. And at one point, they were celebrating being a cowboy versus Indians. You never knew why you were against the Indians. Even when I was growing up. But I wanted to make this video short and sweet to the point so I can get it up on YouTube. And this is the day of Thanksgiving, and it's all for you. So it's all 100% pagan, and it's definitely misleading. This is your true Thanksgiving. This is the meaning of Thanksgiving right here in front of you. Watch the video 10 or 15 times and actually go out there and look up the information. You can find an Indian, tell them, and ask them, what does it really mean? They're going to tell you it's false. Christopher Columbus was false, is a fake, and never came here to the Americas. But you got to understand that most of the time when they found something, they put their names on it. And that's also in the Hebrew scriptures. So their lands are going to be named after them. That's what they do all over the place. Look it up. So what I'll do is I'll give you a hint. It's in Psalms. And put this on the back portion of your brain for a second. If everybody likes to name things after themselves, this is also in the Hebrew scriptures, better known what you call as the Bible. Now, if this is being said in Psalms, all you have to do is look it up and then put it in there. And you're going to do a little bit of homework. So, if Christopher Columbus founded the New World, or what you might call New World, why is his name not on any of the land, but yet it's just a holiday? It's all false. Yeah, but if you go to Caesar Borgia, which you might call that the Jesus Christ, the fake Jesus, or Scipio Africanus, or General Africanus, which Africa was named after, then who was America named after? Some say America's Vespucci, but that's who America was named after. Amerigo or Amerigus. In the research, those are the two names, Vespucci. So, where was Christopher Columbus? If this Amerigo or Americus Vespucci is how America got its name. Guys, deception. Simple deception. So, no thanks to Thanksgiving. No thank you. This holiday has a very dark side, like most of your holidays do. The native people of the history of exploitation includes the enslaved of Africans who are not Africans, but they're Hebrews from the land of Israel or the nation of Israel, mocking the poor and getting you to buy things you don't need. So, do you think it's time to dump the celebrations that you keep the cash in your pockets at this point? I agree with this. I found this online. I said, wow, I was building something. I was like, well, look at this. It's right here. So you need to understand that the next day after Thanksgiving, or that weekend after Thanksgiving, they have something called Black Friday. Why don't you guys look up Black Friday? Because everybody else has nation, but African Americans, black people, are the only ones besides Caucasians from the Caucasus Mountains are called themselves white, and the blacks black, which makes no sense. How can you be a color and everybody else has a nationality? Well, I hope you've enjoyed the time here with me. I always enjoy giving you new information or old information to stimulate thought. But this is the Officer Wolfline. You can visit us at theofficerwolfline.com. So like us on Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe. Go to YouTube and hit that button. Facebook. Twitter. Shalom.